Everywhere you go these days, places you visit, from hospitals to shops to play stations to even faster passage at airports, there are a couple of things in common. They ask for your phone number, your Aadhaar card details, and either you promptly dole it out or have a lingering question of should I have given this at all. Digital data and identity theft are loose ends of an overarching concern. Every now and then, one hears of instances that does raise concerns, though the government claims these are exceptions rather than rules. Let's look at some recent instances. A real estate agent in Thane has received income tax notices accusing him of transactions worth 382 crore rupees. His monthly salary is around 20,000 rupees. When he got the job, he was asked for his Aadhaar card, PAN card, photographs, a signed check. All of us who go for jobs, who've attended interviews, who've got a confirmation, have often been asked for these details. The company that hired him allegedly used these documents to open multiple bank accounts and create fake businesses, including a proprietorship, and of course there were shell companies that were involved. These accounts were then used for substantial financial transactions amounting to 382 crore rupees. He got to know of this only once he received the income tax notice. Police say his personal details were used involving fraudulent bank accounts and shell companies established in his name for money laundering. And then this is not just one-off case. There have been a series of other cases as well, and we are trying to bring cases that really have different dimensions. So here we saw about how Aadhaar and your PAN card details were directly misused or abused. Then you have other cases where, you have the FedEx parcel scam that's been going on. People get calls. Victims are falsely informed of Aadhaar card being misused, and the victim is told of illegal substances that are provided in the parcel, and eventually is duped of 12 lakh rupees in this particular case. There was another case of a Chandigarh SIM card Aadhaar link case in which fraudsters posed themselves as crime branch officers claiming the SIM that was issued against the Aadhaar was misused. Victim was told money laundering took place. The caller was threatened of possible arrest, was duped of at least 80 lakh rupees. So these are different cases that we are bringing to you for. Some where Aadhaar is used as a means, or the fact that it has been abused or it's been wrongly used is falsely claimed to the victim in this case. In other cases where it is directly used. So in Gurugram drug smuggling case, again, there was the call claimed that a drugs in a package was sent to Taiwan. The caller claimed that the Aadhaar card was misused for activity, and the caller provided for fake package details and an FIR number. Eventually, this particular customer was duped of 56 lakh rupees. Now, if you look at the larger picture, in 2023, Aadhaar-enabled payment system frauds constituted 11% of the cyber financial scams. Or are these exceptions to the rule? In what could be one of the biggest data breaches in Indian history, details of over 81.5 crore Indian citizens were on sale on the dark web in 2023, according to US-based cybersecurity firm Resecurity. The data sets on sale contained crucial information such as Aadhaar and passport details, along with names, phone numbers, and addresses, according to the report. Many people, though, still have questions on what if the Aadhaar or the personal data is breached? What harm can be caused if these data are not so-called not secured? And that's where the complex world of cybersecurity really opens up. It was last year that the Ayush Ministry had compromised data containing more than 320,000 patient records, each including personally identifiable information, or PII, including the medical diagnosis. Now, if you look at it, the Supreme Court, 7 years ago, a 9-judge bench had declared that the right to privacy is protected as an intrinsic part of right to life and personal liberty under Article 21 and is part of the freedoms guaranteed by the Constitution. On 26 September 2018, by a majority of 4-1, the Supreme Court substantially upheld the validity of the Aadhaar Act, held that it did not violate the right to privacy. In fact, in 2018, the Supreme Court barred private players from collecting data. It was in 2019 that government proposed amendments to allow access to private companies, including financial services and telecom services. And currently, in 2023, government has already proposed that private entities may be allowed Aadhaar authentication, but government must be satisfied about privacy compliance. And the motive, they claim, is to enable ease of living to citizens. These are complex issues, complex questions, and a lot of concerns that are genuine. Citizens really have a lot of questions. We're going to try and address each of them. I'm being joined right now by Pavanduggal, who's a cybersecurity expert, Lloyd Matthias, who's an independent director for Protein Ego and Tech, Sri Parthasarthi, partner for Forbes Mazhars, and Aditya Pratap, who's an advocate. Thank you very much, all four of you, for joining us. Mr. Pavanduggal, my first question to you. So how should ordinary citizens be looking at these instances? Should they be looking at this as a rule, as an exception to the rule, or as a reality check?
Well, I think citizens need to wake up to the fact that we have already entered into a new era. I call it this new cyber world order post-COVID-19. In this particular new era, there'll be two constant elements in our day-to-day lives. Number one, cyber crimes will become a new normal. And number three, cyber security breaches will be our daily companion. Now, once we start understanding these things as an integral part of our existence, we'll begin to start seeing the perspectives in a different light altogether. The reality already is that there are only two kinds of people in the world. Ones who know that they have become a victim of cybercrime, and two who do not know that they have become a victim of cybercrime. Just because you have not yet become a victim of cybercrime should not give you comfort that you will never ever face cybercrime. So I think the reality check is that this is now the existing norm that's happening. Cyber criminals post-COVID-19 have become both intelligent and lazy at the same time. They want to do minimal work, but in minimal work, they want to go ahead and get your maximum monies out of your respective pockets. So in a scenario like this, please understand, with the coming of artificial intelligence, cyber criminals are further honing their skills. A new phenomenon has emerged known as cybercrime as a service powered by artificial intelligence. So you have programs like Fraud GPT, which are now guiding cyber criminals on how to commit fraud. So please don't be in a hurry to go ahead and dish out your governmental identities, whether it's your Aadhaar or any other details, for the very simple reason, Aadhaar card is no longer India's new ration card. Aadhaar card actually is a repository that's got a connection with your biometric data. And if your Aadhaar stands compromised, there's hardly going to be any remedy that's going to be available to you under the Aadhaar Act. Like this gentleman has got this notice for 380 crore rupees. The law says the onus will be upon him to prove that he did not go ahead and do this exercise. So don't be in a hurry to land up giving our Aadhaar cards to others, because the potentiality of that being misused is going to be massive. And I think we must be cautiously careful to add an element of distrust and mistrust in our perspectives whenever we are seeing information. Let's not be floored by new temptations or some early fruits, or maybe some big lotteries or some monies. Let's learn to understand that we are the only sentinels who will safeguard our own respective privacy. So the more careful we are in terms of going ahead and sharing our personal private details and sensitive personal data, the better it will ultimately be to make our digital privacy and personal privacy far more secure and resilient in the coming times.
In fact, you make a very important point, Mr. Duggal, and I'd like to get Mr. Matthias into it. But, you know, you're talking about how this gentleman got the IT notice. The fact is that we reached out to this gentleman. My team spoke to this gentleman, the victim in this particular case, and he said that he's way too poor to handle a case like this. He's way too scared about a case like this. He never thought he could be part of all of this. He doesn't even know how so much of money really looks like. He has a salary of 20,000 rupees. He's a very young person. He lives in what is often known in the Indian parlance as a chawl. And he finds himself completely incapable to handle something like this. Lord Matthias, I want to ask the same question I asked Mr. Duggal, and this is to you. Do you see this as an exception, or do you see this as a reality check? Because let's look at what Pavanduggal says. There are only two categories of people. One who know that they have been compromised. The others who don't know that they have been compromised. Doesn't mean that they are not.
Thanks, Sneha. I would take a less cynical view. I do agree that digital payment fraud and impersonation, impersonation is growing rapidly. The surge is phenomenal pretty much in the last 4 years. And I do believe there is a lot more case for more scrutiny. But I would look at it in two parts. I think at one level, there is the onus on the individual, right? In this instance, I mean, the person parted with his PAN, with his Aadhaar, and a few blank checks. So I think that's clearly where a red flag is. Having said which, idea is not to victim shame. I think we recognize that people have to be far more careful.
No, certainly. These are things to learn from, and I think you're going the right way, sure.
Yeah, and therefore I think people have to be far more watchful about their digital identity. I think Mr. Duggal rightly said, we can't be dishing out our Aadhaar to everyone. To my mind, very clearly, that's nothing but a repository of our biometrics, that is information, but use other identity documents. Second, I think for a lot of people, it's about being wary of unsolicited offers. I think most people start
Lloyd
with
Matthias,
this.
sorry, I have to interrupt you here. You make a valid point. We have to be more conservative in, dishing out our details. But look at where this gentleman dished it out. He dished it out to a company that was offering him a job of 20,000 rupees. How many of us would have courage to say, we are not going to give you our Aadhaar card and a PAN card?
Yeah, I think
for a job that one is getting.
Yeah, but
he's not gone to a fancy mall or a thing where he can have the option of saying, I won't give you.
Okay, Sneha, you possibly know more about this case than I do, but I also know that he handed out a series of signed blank checks. That's where I see the red flag, right? So I see your point, and I'm saying very often victims don't recognize the extent of where they're going into. But I would say one is to be a little wary of unsolicited offers. Two is to kind of, to the extent possible, verify the information in terms of whatever you're parting with. And I think thirdly, which a lot of people are falling prey to these days, is beware of emotional triggers and think that, fear, right? That you've got a parcel from A organization. If you don't respond within 24 hours, very often they use threats, legal action, your payment is due, your connection is going to be stopped. So I think be careful. I think that's the other part. And I think lastly, it's about to have far better personal identity. The point I want to make is that while there is a lot of cyber crime, a lot of cyber criminality, I think we can't ignore the fact that what India has achieved in the last 4 or 5 years on digital public infrastructure is remarkable. And to a large extent, it's made a lot of our lives easier. And I'm not just talking of e-commerce, I'm talking of the way we handle the COVID. I think the way we do our digital payments, the whole UPI has been a transformation. The DigiLocker has been quite phenomenal. So I think there are positives to it, but I think a lot more needs to be done in educating the populace, being far more sensitive. And thirdly is for regulators to actually look closely end to end to penalize cyber criminals severely. This is no longer a white-collar crime. This is a very, very serious crime that can affect lives of people.
Absolutely, absolutely. It can have absolutely devastating impacts for that matter. Shri Parthasarathi, if I can get you, and my question here is, while the Supreme Court has, of course, settled this case at least, several times now, and has said that there's no invasion of right to privacy when it comes to the Aadhaar card. But it has also gone ahead and said private players need to be restricted. Private players cannot have access in terms of collecting of the Aadhaar card or the details such as that. But you do have those players. There's a government's proposal that's out right now. And for 2023, it was out, which asked for responses where they would say that, they would have criteria for private players to come in and collect personal details like Aadhaar and PAN and so on and so forth. But they need to give out a complete explanation of what they're doing and how they're doing and so on and so forth. But Mr. Parthasarathi, for an average citizen, whether it be a senior citizen or whether it be a young person, what should they keep in mind? Is there a way to ensure that you safeguard yourself from frauds on documents that literally are your identity in 2024?
Sorry about that. Sneha, you
Mr.
bring some
Parthasarathi,
interesting
I think
points
you'll have
here.
to unmute yourself.
Yeah, I've done that. I think
Please, go
even my
ahead.
past two speakers brought some interesting points. I think today, if you take an average citizen, while we talk about private companies, I think government and non-government, there is a significant usage of these particular ID cards, and also in terms of your the Aadhaar and other things where you are supposed to go. For example, if you need to go anywhere in Gurgaon, if you need to go into a building, you need to provide your government ID. Are they really protecting that particular information? I don't know. Similarly, if you really want to have a bank loan, you want to buy a property, you have to do all of these. All of these, you do not have a choice. When you're standing there, they ask you for all of this particular information. While Supreme Court talks about the private players, I think there's also equal responsibility on government and PSU banks and others to basically manage that very effectively. So now coming to the point in terms of what can a citizen do, I think there are a lot of protection mechanisms already inbuilt into some of these. For example, not giving out your physical Aadhaar. Second is the government has already launched what you call as the virtual ID quite some time back. How do you use the virtual ID? Third is essentially online verification of some of this particular information, which you can do with along with your fingerprint, which is your biometric. The last one is essentially using it on the DigiLocker, where you do not transmit these particular documents. So I think there are some protection mechanisms which are already inbuilt. But now let me take you to a rural user. In a rural kind of a setting where the person is not that very educated, there is something called assisted services, where a person goes and tells a person, this is my personally identifiable information, please check whether my banking information and other things are there, right? So that is where the challenge is when you really look at 600 million population that we have, which is almost in that particular segment who possibly need those assisted services. And I think the big trinity
No, but
of
Mr.
Jandan,
Parthasarathi,
Aadhaar.
the truth is that it's not just rural India. A lot of people, even in urban India, even in metros, even in cities, find themselves very incapable, find themselves in some very complex situations to be very incapable to deal with such circumstances. It's not just a rural versus urban divide. The digital India divide is quite pushing through this divide. It's quite an equalizer in many ways.
I totally agree. Even today, if most of us look at the number of passwords that we not need to possibly remember, I think it becomes very daunting. And I think if you look at the kind of digital devices that we have, whether it's the old or the young, I think they do struggle with these particular devices and the digital payment mechanisms. And I think which is one of the reasons, if you really look at in terms of buy now and pay later, is starting to increase, almost like 11% increase across the world, and almost like 21% in India. While essentially everybody wants to push everything digital, people are trying to go to offline mechanisms where they can actually do this. But I think the bigger thing is essentially if I look at the Jandan, Aadhaar, and mobile trinity. If somebody gets access to all three of these, then you're done for, because your identity theft and everything is possibly something that is very, very simple. In this particular gentleman's case, I think the easiest one would have been for these particular people to take all of these particular IDs and also give him a corporate phone whereby they had all of that particular information and they could have spoof that phone so that whenever there was an Aadhaar OTP or the other thing coming in, it was coming into that particular phone and they could do anything to his particular transaction.
Right. Aditya Pratap, my question to you is legally, how does one look at this? There are, of course, instances where Aadhaar is not mandatory. There are places where Aadhaar is mandatory. But by and large, taking recourse to Aadhaar, to PAN card is a way of life. Does an ordinary citizen have the choice of saying no? While legally, yes, they do have a choice. When you're working with an institution, when you're working in tandem with any organization, whether it be a mall or whether it be whatsoever, they do have a right to say no, to provide you service if they wish to. I mean, what would a customer say?
See, let me hit the nail on the head. I run a law office. When a candidate comes to join me as an employee, I ask for a copy of his Aadhaar card. I ask for a copy of his PAN card. Aadhaar and PAN card are a necessity, and it is necessary to have the identity of every citizen logged into a digital database. The recent fraud of a private company employee leaves one grave implication. It is a case of systemic failure. Let us suppose I make my PAN card public. Let us suppose I make my Aadhaar card public. I'll make my passport public. The fact is, when a bank account is open, did the bank follow the KYC procedure or not? RBI prescribes KYC person. He has to go in person. There has to be signature. So many things. Today, just to say that Aadhaar is vulnerable, Aadhaar data is leaked, that does not answer everything. Fact of the matter is, we are dealing with a systemic failure, an outright act of corruption, where bank officers may have been bribed to open accounts in violation of the RBI KYC norms. So first and secondly, what is the purpose of Aadhaar? Purpose of Aadhaar is for the government of India to provide a central authentication service. Person goes to take mobile phone, gives his Aadhaar card, Aadhaar number is entered, you match your biometrics. From the UIDAI server, the match should come that he's that person or not. That is the very essence behind Aadhaar. And clearly that was not followed in the present case. Third, there has been a talk about government entrusting Aadhaar data to private companies. My stand on the issue is government cannot give a red carpet to the private sector here. Ownership of the public data has to be with the statutory interpretations, with the statutory institutions. And I will put the question to the government. Why does Aadhaar data of citizens get leaked? Today, you are the custodian of India's nuclear launch codes. Will the nuclear launch codes get leaked the same way people's Aadhaar data gets leaked? Just because the government cannot perform its obligation towards the people does not mean that it can, let the private sector to do the authentication. So yes, we have the Aadhaar Act. Under the Aadhaar Act, Aadhaar is required only when you want to avail of a government largesse, like ration and others. But now it is very clear, the practical implication is it is a way of life. And what I say is, no matter how secure the Aadhaar system, till the time other components of the institutional framework, like bank officers, who should have called the applicant in person, done the mobile number verification, and not done, clearly such frauds will continue to happen. And this requires a police investigation and registration of FIR for not only sections of identity theft, but also under sections of forgery and other sections of the Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita.
Right, Lord Matthias, I'd like to get you in at this point. Do you want to respond to the concerns that Aditya Pratap has raised? And not just to what Aditya Pratap has raised, let's also just look at some cases that have happened, say, over the last 2 years, whether it be the ICMR data leak or whether it be the Ayush Ministry data leak. All of these things have raised major questions about how the data is secured, whether it be by private players or by government. Huge concerns because, and I want to get in Mr. Duggal later, but Lord Matthias, even as the government has proposed the entry of private players, expanding the scope of private players when it comes to collection of private data, particularly with respect to Aadhaar, PAN, and so on and so forth, protection of the existing data bank has major concerns. And often, though these leakages are reported, there's never seemed to be a closure from the government in terms of what has happened, how has it been protected, has it been protected, has any intervention been made. It's quite discreet, very secretive, lack of transparency. All of this just stares at an ordinary citizen.
I agree, Sneha. And just to the point Mr. Pratap made, I think it's right because to some extent, let's say in the early days of Aadhaar, maybe a decade ago, I think all of us gave out our Aadhaar cards pretty freely, right? Whether it was to a telecom company, to open a bank account, it was used freely as an identity. It's only in the last 2 years we've been cautioned that you don't share your Aadhaar card so freely. It's more a validation of your identity. So person at best can kind of use it to ascertain that you're the right kind of person. Having said which, I think where we have an issue is that the government, given how quickly the digital ecosystem is evolving, and quite rightly with the Jam Trinity, right, the Jandan, the Aadhaar, I think today anybody can pretty much clean you out in that context. I think there has to be a clear policy in terms of identities provided, right? So whether it's an Aadhaar, a PAN, a driving license, an election identity card, a passport, a ration card, I think today there has to be a clear policy on what needs to be provided. Shri was right that you walk into any huge corporate complex in Bombay, Delhi, or Bangalore, the first thing they ask you is identity. And very often we fish out an Aadhaar card or a PAN card. Right now, it should be very clearly made known that A, this is what you can provide and what you cannot provide. But more importantly, where is this data being stored? I mean, it takes nothing from getting hold of that data from a security man's register and then impersonating people. So I think one, we need very, very clear laws and much greater protection on anyone who demands identity proof. How is that identity being stored? Right? And at one level, people as a level, we kind of give out our information far more freely. But the only point I want to caution is that it's important not to throw the baby out of the bathwater. What digital has enabled has been phenomenal. Yes, we need a lot more careful scrutiny. Yes, we need to be far more watchful, both as individuals, and I think the government has to play an enabling regulatory role to caution citizens on what's kosher and what's not.
Okay.
Today, we're very, very casual about it, and I think that's a big, big danger signal.
Okay, very quickly, Pavanduggal, I just want you to spend 2 minutes on an important aspect. And let's just take it for granted that some of the viewers who are watching us don't really know how this works. So could you explain this threadbare to us? That what happens if your Aadhaar ID card, if your PAN card number, if this gets leaked, why is this a concern? How is this going to possibly devastate your life, to put it very lightly, to put it in an extreme manner? But why is this dangerous? At the end of the day, these are just numbers. Could you just explain this to us?
An Aadhaar number is not just a number. It is connected directly to your biometrics. And therefore, if you'll end up dishing this entire number to people outside who are not really required to use it, then clearly you're exposing your Aadhaar number. Now, problem is, when they built Aadhaar, it was built on the basis of a cabinet note, and consequently, cyber security was never an integral part of the intrinsic architecture on which Aadhaar was built. Today, the Aadhaar Act tells you that if you go ahead and you find that your Aadhaar has been compromised, you do not have any right to even report this to the police, because the police is not obligated to get your complaint. Only the Unique Identification Authority of India is authorized to raise police complaints. Now, when the UIDAI gives up registers more than about a couple of dozen FIRs every year because of breach of cybersecurity or the misuse of Aadhaar, it's primarily because the government started connecting everything with Aadhaar. So the Aadhaar intrinsically is fine because you have the central identities data repository where your and my biometric information is located. But the moment you start connecting various things to Aadhaar, whether it's bank records, whether it's income tax, whether it's company records, now you created an ecosystem that's
which is inevitable largely now.
Aadhaar, but that ecosystem is completely unsecure. And if you're not going to take it, but then the problem is, if it's there, it's like a ball of fire. Now, therefore, you as users have to realize where all do I need to enter the ball of fire, if at all it's absolutely necessary, and what all steps need to be taken. Well, as per one report, 81 crore Indians' sensitive personal data is lying available for sale on the dark net. Now, if that be the case, the government has done some good work. The government has come up with the Digital Personal Data Protection Act, and it's currently working up with the rules. If they come up in force, then to a large extent, it's going to help protect and preserve your and mine sensitive personal data. However, we have to realize that when you are actually sharing your Aadhaar, you're even committing an offense under the Aadhaar Act, because the Aadhaar is not required to be shared with entities who are not authorized to accept the same. Further, have you ever asked yourself, have I masked my Aadhaar? If not, then I need to immediately mask my Aadhaar. Have I just been distributing photocopies of my Aadhaar? Well, that's water down the bridge. Can I wake up from my deep slumber today and start understanding that I will not go and share my Aadhaar? Why? For the very simple reason that world over, this bleeding of cybersecurity breaches is leading to catastrophic results. Last year, the world lost more than $6 trillion to cybersecurity breaches. This year, by the end of 2024, we should be losing $8 trillion, and a big chunk of that is going to come from India. So let's learn to understand that let's not purely be dependent on the government and the law, let's learn to put our own due diligence, care and caution, and wherever possible, not use Aadhaar, because Aadhaar is intrinsically connected with the biometrics as a basic process to go ahead and protect my personal privacy and data privacy. And ask those people whose Aadhaar numbers stand compromised. They have no remedy under the Aadhaar Act, and their lives is devastated for the large number of times that they're going to look up. So it's better to be safe than sorry. Let's not be adventuristic on Aadhaar, but at the same time, let's also realize that the golden age of cybercrime has kicked in. And this is going to be with us for the next many decades. So it's our bounden duty to make sure that we don't land up giving our personal data on a platter to the cyber criminals so that they can use it or misuse it and cause irreparable loss and injury to me. Therefore, due diligence, caution, and care will have to be your guiding mantras as you go forward in this new age of uncertainty and more digitization.
Shri Parthasarthi, I mean, I was just trying to look at some instances over the last 2 days where me or people I know had to give out their Aadhaar card. So this is the season where you're applying for admissions. So I know of people who have given in their Aadhaar card to schools as they've been applying for admissions for their children in school. I know of people who've given their Aadhaar card while buying a phone. I know of people who've had to give out their Aadhaar card while buying a SIM card. I know of people who've had to give out Aadhaar for police verification of their domestic workers. So these are just instances I'm recalling over the last 2 days. And I mean, this is how life in India really is panning out. So how, I mean, it's a normal question that every citizen has. This is what is expected of them every single day. So what must they do in this particular context?
Here, I think one of the important aspects that a citizen really needs to take is the government already provides a facility where they can monitor where their Aadhaar, PAN, and others are being used and where it is being used. So first thing is that they can do that. Second is, unfortunately, most of the Aadhaars and most of the personal IDs are already out there. So where does the responsibility lie? The responsibility lies, I would say, with organizations who have basically collected this information to discover, classify, and redact any of that particular information, which they don't really need to provide any of their particular services. So I think it's important both for private and government entities to go through a complete process. Mr. Duggal talked about DPDPA, but the DPDPA, because of the complexity of implementing privacy in India, only covers digital data. It does not cover what you call as physical data. And if you take the past 15, 20 years, most of us have given a lot of our Aadhaar and other thing in physical form. So the question is, how do you go after all of that particular digital data and personal data that resides there? And how do you really bring it to a controllable shape? And most organizations today are performing what I would call as a data privacy assessment to understand, or a data risk assessment to understand what kind of data do they really have. Because most organizations today don't know the kind of data that they're sitting on.
Right.
Second is, which of that information are they legally allowed to keep? Which are the information they are not allowed to keep? Second. Third is essentially what action are they taking to specifically protect that particular information. Lastly, I think if we need to continue to have the digital age continue, the government, like in the US, needs to protect the end citizen. I think we need to have some level of insurance or other thing for an end citizen so that they are protected, because as you said, it is a norm today to give out your particular information. And if this is what the citizen is doing, you cannot basically penalize them there. You have to give them alternate mechanisms and also push what I would call as corporate, push government and other agencies which are collecting this information, and I think penalize them first and then essentially go to the citizen.
Right. Aditya Pratap, very quickly, if I can come into you, what's the legal recourse for somebody who has been wronged, who has been compromised in this particular case? Do they have any defense when it comes to being defended by the government, support from the government, support by the law? Or are the laws extremely ambiguous in this context?
Well, first and foremost, in case a person has suffered a fraud, obviously, whenever a person suffers a case of identity theft, his first and foremost remedy is to lodge an FIR with the local police station. Police today are quite adept at quick registration of cyber FIRs. However, the investigation and that the UIDAI would have to investigate. But let me tell you that if an offense has been committed, the police has ample powers of investigation to even summon the necessary information from the UIDAI. Third thing is that against the entity which has leaked the personal, like for example, if I give my Aadhaar details to a bank, and obviously, as I said, Aadhaar has to be verified by the biometrics. Let's suppose my bank server were to be hacked, or somehow the biometrics got leaked. I can even file a police complaint for criminal breach of trust against the bank, because I can always say that I had entrusted my banker with my biometrics and he has not exercised the due standard of care while safeguarding the biometrics. And finally, I can always file a civil suit for compensation against the entity which leaked my Aadhaar data. So I would say the time-honored remedies in law, if they are exercised well, see, because when it comes to invoking legal remedies, I'm a bit on the conventional side. But if these conventional remedies are implemented well, then a lot of these scams can be addressed. Like today, when we talk about so many cyber hacking scams, let me tell you why so many cyber hacking scams happen. Because, one of my clients was telling me, some fraud happened. His money got robbed in an investment scam. The police department demands money. Policemen seek bribes from cyber victims. So on one hand, we are talking about strengthening the cyber infrastructure of the country. On the other hand, we have policemen. Whenever a cyber crime happens, they register an FIR, and whoever's account the money has gone, they summon him, threaten him, demand bribes from him. So this is the state of law enforcement in the country. So I do feel that as a private citizen, if his Aadhaar data is leaked, he can invoke the civil as well as criminal remedies with the police against the entity which leaked his data, as well as file a complaint with the UIDAI. And most important, let's suppose nothing happens, he can always move the High Court by way of a writ petition under Article 226 of the Constitution of India, because UIDAI is a state authority and right to privacy by virtue of the Puttaswamy judgment of Supreme Court has been held to be part of the right to life under Article 21 of the Constitution of India. So I straightaway say, whenever your personal Aadhaar data is compromised, approach the High Court under Article 21 and Article 226.
All right, I think irrespective of which side you are of this debate, there's one thing that we all will agree on, and that is you have to be cautious of where and when you are giving out your data, your personal data, even if it is as simple as your Aadhaar card number. Pavanduggal, Lord Matthias, Shri Parthasarathy, as well as Aditya Pratap, thank you very much for joining us on a very, very important discourse. Thank you so much.